The art history channel Canvas just released a video which I just can't stop thinking about. Canvas asked for feedback on the video and to spark a discussion, so here it is. I'm Dr. Lawrence Newport, this is In Pursuit of Progress, and this is my response to no, AI art isn't art. Canvas quickly dispatches with some of the worst arguments around AI art, specifically that AI art is somehow immoral for being trained on artists' previous works. As Canvas notes, this is literally how all culture and technology and art develops.
I would argue that human progress is the history of people building upon the progress of their predecessors.
Standing on the shoulders of giants is true of nearly everything. Canvas does a great job of just dispatching with this point quickly, so there's no need for me to go into detail here, I completely agree. However, then the disagreements really begin.
What about companies using AI-generated images to replace the work of artists?
So let's break this down. AI art is absurdly cheap or often entirely free. This clearly means it's difficult for artists to compete. Canvas is right that this is going to disrupt art. Canvas, however, spends curiously little time on the upsides of cheap, personalized art. Namely that many more people can now access individualized, personalized art, with more people enjoying art and art being more numerous and more accessible and vastly easier to create. This is because, in Canvas's view, it's bad that art is cheap or free because apparently corporations will use this and artists will therefore lose out. I agree that it's likely that companies will probably be using AI art, but I actually don't think that'll be the major use case. If you look at Pepsi or Coca-Cola, when they change their logo, they hire a team of hyper-expensive graphic designers. These designers pore over the company history, show a plethora of designs, give a deep-seated reason for their creation, and then display the couple of lines they've added or taken away. This exists even though a major corporation could probably spend 1% of the cost of that and hire thousands of artists on Fiverr or other platforms to produce a logo for them. This would be super cheap, probably super quick, and they'd be presented with tons of different options. So why don't companies tend to do this? It's because human expertise and the show of it is all a part of that premium price. Or maybe their designs are really that incredibly different, I don't know. The point is, I don't think that AI art is likely to be used by corporations, or rather I think they'll just be a very small part of the AI art market, and I'm sure nearly every user at the moment is an individual or smaller startup. So why doesn't Canvas use these examples? Maybe they don't think it's so bad if normal people just use AI art for free or cheap, which is great, but that would mean the point here is pretty hollow, considering just how many normal people will actually be doing that. Or two, it's because it sounds way worse to really bite the bullet of Canvas's argument on this, that art being cheap is bad for artists and normal people shouldn't be able to afford it.
What if the artist who needs a wage and money to live is replaced by a cheap AI?
For the moment, I think it's useful to pause and consider how similar these kinds of arguments are and the tradition that Canvas's video really sits within. The concern around AI art is the concern that multiple industries have had whenever they are faced with automation or industrialization. The difference with AI is that it threatens professional classes, like lawyers, academics, doctors, and of course, artists. Historically, professional classes were the members or leaders of guilds. Guilds were historical institutions given the right to some sort of practice. For instance, in England, all books and publications for print, including early newspapers, had to be registered with the Stationers' Company. And this lasted, on and off, for a few hundred years. If books weren't accepted by the Stationers' Company, they were illegal. This allowed a whole bunch of controls over what was acceptable to be published and what counted as legitimate, or at least legal, works of literature. And this is just one kind of guild. Others got together to collude over prices to ensure they wouldn't have to compete with one another, though, as I mentioned, in the Industrial Revolution, guilds were not the threatened classes by and large. Instead, it was people in factories. People like the Luddites. The members of the Luddites were weavers, who saw their role in the manufacture of items like clothes being overtaken entirely by machines. To get around the loss of their jobs and their livelihoods, they attacked and destroyed textile machinery. Modern day Ludditism is not found in factories or agriculture. As I'll talk about in a moment, it's already pretty obvious now how good automation has been for all of society in those areas. Instead, modern day Ludditism is about protecting those in the guild. Not actual real guilds, but the metaphorical wider class of guild professions. Metaphorical guild members, just like the Luddites did in the past, must try to stop the growth of technology and thereby ensure that their professional services are kept as expensive, time-consuming and elite as they can. But this direct point isn't actually what Canvas says. Instead, surprisingly given what they've said so far, Canvas actually agrees that automation is good and that no society would ever say no to more automation.
Automation is a good thing. Any society in the history of humanity would gladly cheer for automation.
Which is pretty encouraging and right and just kind of cool to see. However, we are then all warned that...
Well, not under capitalism. For capitalism, automation is a bad thing.
I don't know what successful modern system of automation outside of capitalism they're thinking about, perhaps like windmills and feudalism, or wartime economies producing vast amounts of weaponry. But regardless, the central contention at this point is that under capitalism, automation just makes things more expensive. In other words, Canvas doesn't want to openly argue that professional art is more expensive, but that actually, AI art will make things more expensive in the future, that automation makes everything more difficult to afford. This just, very plainly, isn't true. If you look at prices in the US, the amount of time someone on the median wage would have to work to earn enough money to buy goods can show us precisely how much difference automation can make. To afford a car in 1908, you'd have to work for 4 times as many hours as you would do to afford a car in 2015. A camera in 2015 costs only 5.7% of the total hours someone would need to work to buy one in 1987. And today you would have to work 1 million fewer hours than you would in 1915 to pay for a single telephone call. That's innovation and automation making everything cheaper. This being said, Canvas actually later undercuts their own point here by somewhat then seeming to agree kind of with me.
I see it as a way of slowly liberating ourselves from the necessity to labor for survival.
They state clearly that the more automation we have, the less we have to strive to just survive, to just clothe ourselves and eat, and the more time we can have for other pursuits, like, for instance, creating and exploring art. This is clearly because automation lifts humanity as a whole, or at least has done so far, and we should expect it to continue to do so. None of this is to say that the world is perfect as it is currently, but the world is so much better than it was in the past, almost unbelievably so, and we should be protective of that and careful with it, and hopefully move to a world in which scarcity of resources just isn't a factor anymore. Canvas actually goes further than this though and claims that the problem with automation is that no one ends up with jobs because they're all automated away. Historically though, this isn't what happened. New jobs were created in new areas. So how do we make sense of this? There's loads to go into here, but here's just an indication to explain a tiny part of why what has happened historically. People have, of course, lost jobs because of automation, but new jobs have been created as a result of automation, just in different areas. If things are cheaper and you can make more stuff more quickly, new industries can form because their basic goods are cheaper to create, which creates new jobs. Things like phones and TVs are cheaper because of the cheaper price of their physical parts. In fact, near the end of Canvas's video, the example of photography is used to actually show exactly this. It's already happened once in art. Photography put a lot of artists out of work, but it actually ended up creating loads of new forms of artwork and new jobs for different forms of artists. Back to AI art.
Many artists, just to afford living, need to sell out, need to make art they don't necessarily like or necessarily want to do. That makes for soulless art.
According to Canvas, then, art that artists do not want to create, that they are making solely because they are paid, are not soulful pieces of art. My feet unguided wander to and fro. In front my skin grows loose and long behind. By bending it becomes more taut and straight. Crosswise I strain me like a Syrian bow. Whence false and quaint I know. Must be the fruit of squinting brain and eye, for ill can aim the gun that bends awry. Come then, Giovanni, try to succour my dead pictures and my fame. Since foul I fare, and painting is my shame. This poem is written by an artist, decrying the physical torture of creating a piece he was currently making. Worse though, he was unable to think clearly and viewed his painting as dead, as lifeless, perhaps as soulless. He wasn't a painter, he was a sculptor, forced to make a piece of art he would never have chosen to make if not for the money. This is Michelangelo, writing to a friend about his painting of the Sistine Chapel, one of the greatest pieces of artwork in the Western tradition. Michelangelo didn't want to do it in the first place and suggested it be sent to Raphael instead. But the Pope insisted, and Michelangelo essentially had to take on the project and was given a large fee. I suppose we are left to wonder if this art is truly soulless. Presumably, under Canvas's definition, it must be. Canvas's point is that we should be able to peer into the minds of an artist, know their motivations, and then assess various pieces as soulful or not on the basis of what we think that artist is thinking about. With AI art, there's no such mind to peer into, so it must have no soul. I don't think it's right to say things like this have no soul, but really, I think I mean something different to Canvas. I mean something like this piece of art feels soulful, and he seems to mean something like is made by an artist I think had thoughts in a particular way and didn't just do it for money. What particular way should artists be thinking? Well, this leads us to the last, and in my opinion, the worst argument of all. Canvas caveats this next part as a bit scary for some people.
Separating art from entertainment or high art from low art is an exercise that can lead into elitist territory.
This disclaimer doesn't actually help very much, as that's precisely what this last section is. I'm going to be clear though, I don't think arguing that some art is high art is an argument Canvas should shy away from. It's actually the point they kind of want to make. But the problem is, they also want to make this into a moralizing argument, so it comes across as a bit strange if they then make a spirited defense of elitism in art. But let's look at what they actually say.
A sunset isn't art, though it can be beautiful. A tree isn't art, though it can be beautiful.
A urinal, when in the right context, however, is art. This is because art for Canvas is about meaning. Art requires a social conversation to be sparked in the audience or to convey some kind of social message.
Art requires something like a social conversation, a broader reflection, a deeper meaning or intention.
Anything that doesn't have this meaning, like a beautifully painted landscape with no social message, is, in Canvas's view, illustration. This is essentially a nicer way of saying low art, or really just saying not art. But this means that AI can produce wonderful illustration, but AI illustration is not art because it cannot have a social message within it. It can't be made with an artistic intent and then interpreted by an audience for its social or other messages. This is totally fine for Canvas to think, but this is just not how people actually use the word art. They do sometimes use it to mean things that wouldn't be art but in a given context are, like the urinal example, but people also use it to mean that pretty painting that I like the look of, which is, as Canvas would put it, just a landscape. If we were to rigidly follow Canvas's definition of art, we'd end up saying that this is art, but that this isn't, or that this is art, but that this isn't. Let's look closer at this definition though. Canvas calls anything that hasn't got a message behind it illustration, creative pieces which haven't got the depth of art. A depth which is found by a creation of meaning in the audience that views it. This seems to confuse several aspects. It is clearly possible under Canvas's own definition for an artist to create something which is just a nice landscape and made entirely for profit, but that sparks a conversation in the audience which the artist never considered or aimed for. It's possible, essentially, even under Canvas's definition, for AI art to be art. I don't know what art in the future will look like. I don't know what new and exciting ventures artists are going to come up with, but I can't wait to find out, I can't wait to see, and I believe we're only at the beginning of what is going to be an incredible revolution across multiple areas of human life, one of which is already happening in art. So this is my opinion. AI art is art. It's cheap, fast, accessible, and can even, as Canvas says, be beautiful. Art is more open, more personal, and infinitely more in volume than it ever was before. Like there is for cars or furniture or clothes, handmade works will still be able to charge a premium, but now so many more people out there can create and experience art for themselves, personalized, imbued with meaning, and beautiful. What a wonderful, incredible opportunity. A world in which art, at least, isn't a limited resource. See you next time, and thanks.